Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 128 of Humanity Rising. Humanity Rising is an initiative of Ubiquity University and now over 350 partnering organizations from all over the world who have come together in the midst of the extraordinary pandemic in which we all find ourselves to create a global commons so that every day, Monday through Friday, beginning at 5 p.m. Central European Time, people from around the world can come together to share their experiences, share solutions, share ideas and visions, and confer on how we can increase our strategic effectiveness. We made a commitment when we launched on the 22nd of May to do this for as long as the pandemic would last. At that time, we didn't know whether that would be a few weeks or a few months. It's clear as we come to the end of October that the pandemic is getting worse, not better. It's proving to be very intractable. And what we're seeing in different countries around the world are different experiences as different governments and societies have reacted in different ways. So it's really, the pandemic is a tale of two cities, to recall Charles Dickens' great novel of London and Paris during the French Revolution that he wrote, where it's the worst of times and the best of times. Just take, for example, Taiwan. Taiwan hasn't had a COVID case in, I think, something like 200 days. And the reason is that, learning from the SARS epidemic that hit them a number of years ago, they realized as a society, as a government, as a public health system, that there were two fundamental keys to effective dealing in this kind of a situation. First is systematic testing, and secondly, absolutely quick response to isolate the cases and bring the pandemic to order. They've done that scrupulously since the outbreak of the pandemic in February. And now Taiwan is the leading country in the world. Its president is a woman who understands these things and the value of science. And then at the other end, we've got, again, the United States, 4% of the human population with 20% of all the cases and all the deaths, the worst record for COVID of any country in the world. At the beginning of this week, the Trump administration declared victory and said, we're just not going to deal with pandemic anymore, it's over. So the government of the United States is choosing basically not to deal with it, and in fact to ridicule the scientists and the doctors and engage in what's being called mass immunity. It's an extraordinary situation. They set a record in the last 24 hours. There are 87,000 new cases. There's one new case every second now in the United States. And as I said yesterday, 47 out of the 50 states are experiencing rising cases of COVID. And in over 20 states, the hospitals are essentially full. And in the middle of all that, Russian hackers, over the last couple of days, it finally broke into the news this morning, have been attacking US hospitals in the largest cyber attack in US history. The same people, Russian hackers, that were working with the Trump administration in 2016 to destabilize the US presidential election, and have been working with him ever since to do the same thing in the 2020 presidential election, which I've been reporting on, and we're going to be spending all of next week, Monday through Friday, just on the US election. Why? Because the United States is a colossus in the world today. It's the longest continuous democracy in history. And so what happens in the United States is a matter of not only US importance, but global importance. And what we're seeing is a systematic attack by the President of the United States and his Russian colleagues, essentially to stage a coup d'etat. So everybody needs to know that this is happening, and it's around sowing chaos right at the height of the pandemic. The Russian hackers are coming in dozens of hospitals in a range of states with what they call ransomware, where they come in, they hack in, they completely shut down the computers, and then they hold you hostage for a significant amount of money. And if it happens to an entire hospital system, what do you do? Particularly in a situation, as most hospitals are, that are increasingly dependent on the internet and the computer. So the meta strategy going into next Tuesday, everyone, is to sow chaos. It's like the Joker in the Batman movies, if you know the story of the Joker. His power was in his capacity to sow random violence, destruction, and chaos. That's what Trump does. That's the source of his power. And we're going to be going into a lot more detail about it, but it is focused right now on sowing the necessary confusion, throwing the entire electoral process into the courts, which he's been stacking, including now the Supreme Court, and taking the election by stealth to secure what he could not gain in a fair election in 2020, just like he couldn't in 2016. So the situation is very critical, and only a massive voter turnout will stem that tide. And I'm delighted to be able to report that in some states like Texas and Georgia, the turnout has been so massive that there's been more early voting numbers than the entire, in 2020, than the entire election in 2016. So I just lay this out as a very complicated, highly dimensionalized movement of forces, both benevolent and nefarious, around an election that is going to determine the fate of the earth next Tuesday and in its aftermath. And that's why it's so critical that in initiatives like Humanity Rising and everything that we've been trying to profile, and today around shared leadership, how do you lead in a situation like this? You know, and we were so jubilant on Wednesday, just a couple of days ago, to help celebrate the Chilean revolution through the ballot box last Sunday that overthrew the constitution of Pinochet, who had overthrown the government of Salvador Allende back in 1973. 47 years later, the people of Chile overthrew that constitution and have brought in a new constitution, which for the first time in history mandates that government moving forward, including the Constitutional Assembly, has to be 50% women and 50% men. So synchronistically, today, we are going to explore what it means to have true partnership in leadership, because this, what we're going to discuss today, is the wave of the future. But before we commence our program, I want to invite all of you, as we always do, to just take a moment. Take a few deep breaths and place your attention on your heart. Try to listen to your heartbeat for the next 60 seconds in a spirit of gratitude that you're alive at this extraordinary moment in human history, where every choice you make counts in determining human destiny. 1 minute. Thank you, everyone. Now, with an open heart, I would like to turn it over to Dieuwke Begemann, who I've known for many years. She's an organizational consultant living in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, and in France. And for many years, Dieuwke and I have had a conversation about her passion of men and women in equal partnership in leadership. So it's with particular pleasure, Dieuwke, that I welcome you to Humanity Rising today, particularly given the synchronicity with the Chilean election, because this is the program we all need to hear, because this is the future of leadership on planet Earth if we're going to bring about a world of more abundance. Dieuwke?
Thank you, Jim. And thank you for giving me the space to share my insights and thoughts about this subject, shared leadership. Also, very much thank you for being here and opening up this space every night. What many people may not know is that we don't live very far away from each other, either in France or in Amsterdam. From time to time, I invite Jim to take a walk in the forest to get some breath. He's still glued to his computer. But I thank you so much for being here every night and holding the light. It's a great thing you're doing. Shared leadership. Let me first define what I mean with it. It is not about being inclusive and having women too on the stage. I mean it very practical, that a man and a woman have the same position, share the same responsibilities, get the same salary or share the rewards, and may have different tasks, but share the same responsibility and position. I think it needs some explanation why this concept of shared leadership may be a piece of the puzzle we try to make here with each other about the future, which is sustainable. But before I do that, let me introduce myself a little. My subject is very much change. I have always been interested in change. First, in what I wanted to change, and more how things really change. And it brought me, I was like a child already like that. When I was very small, they would say, what is she looking at? And I've always been looking at what can be better. But it brought me that interest and passion for change brought me many places. I worked for the Peace Institute, for the Dutch government. I also worked in the corporate business for IBM, Shell. And especially in the corporate business, I was sometimes approached by the management development department who would say, Dieuwke, our numbers are not political correct. We don't have enough women in the top of our organization. It looks like you are doing pretty well. So could you maybe make a program, do something that we have more women here in the top? And I was always somehow reluctant to do it. I had the feeling, my heart was, of course, with all these women who had to cope with this, with their careers and everything what is going on. But I felt that if I just made some kind of empowerment training for them, that I was touching the top of an iceberg, that there was much more under the water going on than just this lack of good numbers and statistics. So I left it. I never really obliged those companies, and I never made programs to empower women. Till, and now it becomes a very strange story, in the beginning of the 90s, I was in Moscow, and I was working in Moscow because I was invited by the university, the medical faculty of the university, to give empowerment programs to therapists and family doctors. Empowerment was a concept which they were not very familiar with. And it was in the beginning of the 90s, and there was a very good energy in Moscow. People had still a lot of hope for a better future. They were extremely interested in meeting Western people and approached you for all kinds of things. So one day I found myself in a small room, having said yes to an invitation to give a lecture on the future of the relationship between men and women. And I couldn't understand how I could have said yes, but they were so nice and eager to learn that, and it were students. And so I sat there with my notebook thinking, what the hell am I going to say about this subject? It isn't my subject. What am I supposed to do? And I was sitting there in a very small room in one of those very small apartments. And suddenly I got an insight. And I thought, shit, men and women lost each other. They lost each other. They were always working together. They were always doing everything together. They used to have small enterprises. They used to have farms together. And they lost each other at the dawn of industrialization. What happened was that family was a working unit. They did everything together. They lived together. They worked together. They raised their children together. So this unit went to this new factories with a new employment, which was natural. They were a unit. So they arrived there, father, mother, and the children. But the work was that harsh that first the children and then the women were sent home. Now, we learned it at school as something good, the beginning of the welfare state. And of course it was good because the work was terrible harsh. But we didn't learn the consequences. We did not learn the consequences. Because suddenly we had something which had never been there before, a separation between work and home. And a separation which had as consequence that men and women were separated for the first time. And the consequences were unforeseen. How lonely women might get, how the absence of the father might shape a child's identity. What the long-term effects would be of a boy learning that his future would involve a separation from women, and that becoming a man will mean something to do with less warmth and intimacy. Many therapists had a lot of work on that issue. Women had to begin to learn to exercise control, power in terms of how the house looked and functioned, and more importantly, they had to learn how to deal with the fact that the control and instruction of the children had largely become their jobs. Another emotional problem. Now, the workplace, on the other hand, became dominated by the masculine values of functionality, efficiency, short-term efficiency, and rationalization. Our recent financial crisis itself came right out of this dominance of masculine values, short-term profit and new ways to make money for money becoming dominant over any notions of sustainability and care. It's also true that when the workplace became dominated by functionalism, a concern for beauty became irrelevant. No rose bushes were planted against the factory fence, as in the past the women had planted rose bushes against the walls of the farms. And as beauty became the province of the home, we suddenly couldn't spend enough money on beautifying those homes, while the outside world presented uninteresting, undistinguished commercial facades. We had a good philosopher, Marcuse, who in his book One-Dimensional Man warned of this specifically, referencing Freud on the energetic balance between Eros and Thanatos, the main idea of Freud, that we have these two energies balancing each other. He notes that the result of an unfulfilled, deep desire for beauty will be a waking of Thanatos in the form of aggression, depression, and suicides. And we see it all around us. He gives the example of a salesman who in the past had to walk from city to city and endured hardship indeed, but also enjoyed the beauty in nature around him. Now he's in traffic, on highways, surrounded by the surreal architecture as captured by Godard in Alphaville. The broken connection between the men and women had a few other consequences, which we often are hardly aware of. And to show them, to demonstrate them, I'll invoke a perspective from system theory. It's my favorite theory. But it is a relatively new branch of the sciences, which allows for a broader perspective than the individual sciences, because it considers human beings, cultures, universes from a calm perspective that sees them also as systems, behaving as such predictable and coherently. Now, what can system theory say about the relationship between men and women? First of all, consider the couple a system. Now, we know that when a system falls apart, the part which had been contained in it will continue as autonomous systems, much in the way in which the employees of a firm which has broken down will lose their corporate identity and fall back on their individual selves and continuing as such. Now, what was contained in this relationship between men and women? The raising of children, sustaining labor and work, sexuality, care for the damaged and the elderly, care and protection of the dwelling place and its environment. We can see now how these have become autonomous, almost cancerous realities in our societies. The care of young children has become a profit-driven, privately run business, and a manifest failure of that approach fills both our papers and our nightmares. Extended education has assumed enormous proportions as a state responsibility, and we can now educate our children from 3 years old till 30. But to what end? While the primary school provides some safety and a chance for a good education in the occasional presence of an occasional good teacher, the dropout of adolescence is more than disturbing. The culture in the schools is mostly boring, morally emptying, and not inspirational, and often dangerous. The structure is industrial, the learning process broken up in separate, unconnected classes of 40 minutes, where teachers are unable to keep the attention of pupils who find the internet and chat rooms infinitely more interesting. The growing gap between the highly and lower educated in Western society violates the hope parents had to send their children to school for so long. On top of that, research shows that children learn months before they go to school, between 0 and 3 years old. The failure is more alarming when we realize that the economic survival, with robotization coming after us, is dependent on creative professionals. Now, creativity in children is developed when they are alone and bored, and they have to invent something to play with, their own games, or in a group when they have to invent their games. But nowadays, children are on relentless schedules and supplied with virtual entertainment for the few free minutes in between. They not only never have to invent anything for themselves, they don't even have the time for it. Sexuality has become a profit-driven project as well. Everything is for sale. So much so that some men confess that their skills as a lover can no longer compete with the new technologies which their loved one can find for herself. Sexual education is redundant, since everything is available to see, and this violates the invisible aspect of sexuality, the feelings, the sense of union, the occasional shimmer of transcendence. It's gotten so bad that a verb involving two people is seldom used to describe sexuality nowadays. The vocabulary has become one of consumerism. Did you have sex today? Work has expanded in a 24-hour economy, which hardly allows for families life in the form of shared meals and leisure, precisely those times when children were being educated by their parents in values and behavior. Life for the parents has become so busy and stressful that the temptation to leave the children to their games and touchpads is hard to withstand. And we see the results in youngsters who are simply not educated in how to behave in the public space. The upper classes have escaped the whip of the 24 economy by hiring staff, but the upbringing of their children has become a management skill. Who is picking up the children when, where, what time, and what is your turn? Parents are in fact tired, and the number of only children is growing. Care has also become an expensive run-for-profit business. While this allows for good positions and salaries for some, it's at the cost of responsible care and foremost any fostering of love and patience in human beings, something that has been fading since we stopped automatically taking care of family members in need. Now the cost of healthcare are growing at such an alarming rate that the policies making are looking again at care by family and friends. But who can take responsibility for an elderly or sick persons when there are two jobs to take care of and the children as well? Which brings us to the structure of the family itself. Since men and women stopped working together, keys being a system, marriage has become a very unstable institution. The divorce rate is growing from 1 to 3 to 1 to 2, because without common goals and shared values in work, marriage are founded only on good feelings. However, feeling good with the other is a necessary but not sufficient condition for a marriage to work. No one always feels good with a partner. A marriage needs a common goal with shared work and a concomitant increase in mutual understanding and respect. There are well-known examples of couple scientists and artists working together. La Curie's, Nikki French. In fact, the Centre Pompidou organized an exhibit 2 years ago only of couples working together, an artist. But in the research I have done, I have found this vocation-bound mutual respect also strongly among the less glamorous, the teachers, the owners of small enterprises, couples as colleagues. Their marriages were so more stable than the purely romantic ones. Now, what the issue is that maybe everybody is bothered by all these old things and people suffer from it, but there is not much awareness what is really the root of it and what has caused all this to happen. And when I work with groups in my work and I ask people what bothers you, they always come up with the same thing, that there are too many targets, there are much too much time in working, doing administration in the care or for the teachers to do. It is all dominated by these masculine values of having control, making things visible, and they have hardly time to do their work. But also for instance, I work for a nice bank sometimes here in Holland, a former cooperation, which was created. It was a lovely idea to bring money together and share it with whoever was in need. And they knew each other, so they could know if somebody was a little trustworthy or not. And now they have become completely centralized, and they have to sell certain products and not what is needed by the client. And they have to meet the targets, and the whole idea and the values of the bank are gone. So that is what people are bothered about, because they all know that if they would they have hardly the time and the possibility to do their work in a way that it is meaningful and they can use their autonomy. So the idea is we have to close the circle again. If you look at the old symbol of yin and yang, the oldest symbol for the masculine and the feminine, you see that they have to deal with each other because there is a circle around it. And we did cut the circle and it flew in all directions. So we have to close the circle again, shared leadership. And I give an example why it is so important that it is not simple about women in the top or inclusivity. One client of mine is in the board of a hospital. She's a woman and she has 2 male colleagues. The 3 of them are in the board of a hospital. And one day they have a meeting in which they have to decide about the implementation of a new IT system. And she thinks, doesn't feel good yet. I don't trust it. Shouldn't it be more tested? She's not at ease about the situation. But the men think leadership is looking forward, go ahead, no procrastination, and she feels she's just bothering them and she shuts up. So the system is implemented and it creates chaos and misery for everybody. Misery, plain misery. If she had not been in a position that she was there on her own, being appraised individually, and she was there together with somebody and they were together responsible for the response and also appraised together, she wouldn't have given up. And he had to deal with her. So that is what we need, a balance between intuition and logic. Sometimes I'm being asked, another thing why shared leadership is also a necessity nowadays is complexity. As we all know, the world has gone very complex. So it's impossible to organize that from the old pyramid model with the leader, one leader at the top, the expert who comes to save the company, like the old leadership model was. So many people think, can't we have shared leadership the same gender, 2 men or 2 women? Will that not give the same kind of complementary and balancing as you were talking about? And I give an example. We talked about the 2 Anne and Claire, Annie and Claire, that I once gave a talk with about this subject with the editor of a left-wing weekly and the publisher of the weekly. And the weekly was their kind of baby. They both had responsibility for the weekly. They deeply cared about the magazine. And so I explained to them that it was about the balance, though the balance is not always created by it can also be that a man has feminine qualities and the woman has masculine qualities, but the gender difference should be there. So suddenly the man said, oh, now I understand, because when I look at us, she, the head editor, has the masculine qualities. She is always driven for publications. She runs after the journalists that they have their pieces ready. She judges them. She finds them wrong. She makes a fuss. She quarrels with them. I soothe it out. Also, I was the one who took care that they had a lovely new location. I was the one who even took care that they had decent coffee. The coffee was terrible before I arrived here. So I do more kind of the feminine things and she is doing the masculine things. But, he added, I can only do that because she is a woman. In my former job, I worked with a man and they were running together in concert hall here in Amsterdam. Before that, I worked with a man and there was competition between us. And that I don't have with her. There is no competition between me and her. And that allows me to use also my feminine qualities. So a gender difference is needed. Some people say, don't you get this balance in yourself? Shouldn't you find it in yourself? Have the feminine and the masculine meet inside your own soul? And Jung, of course, was the one who claimed that the women should embrace their animus and the men their anima. And that's all very true. But the same Jung said the qualities you develop in later life are always inferior to the ones you have already and stay inferior. Secondly, an organization or a country is not the sum of the individuals. It is a system in itself. And all those systems need to be in balance. So yes, you have to be in balance in yourself, but a team needs also be in balance, 50-50, and leadership should be in balance. Shared leadership, men, women. So I would like, I'm very happy that they are here to interview two couples who are doing this shared leadership and ask them a few questions about how they experience it. And you can also ask questions yourself. The interesting thing is that, like I said, many things happened because of the separation between men and women. And many people, almost nobody is aware that that is at the root of many phenomena which bother us. So sometimes also the opposite is there, that there isn't a couple who are doing it together and hardly even aware of the fact that at the roots of their success is this difference in gender and their cooperation. And that's also a little going on in these couples when I started to talk with them about shared leadership. But let us start with Claire and Andy, and let them first introduce themselves, please, and what they are doing and the business they have together. And maybe Claire, you can say something about that.
Claire, you're muted.
Okay, so we're just joking. That's the most popular phrase. People are talking to each other. You're muted. Okay, so, but yeah. So I just want to kind of share a little bit of Dieuwke. I feel the same way. I get invited to talk about the subject. I really don't know anything about the subject. So I feel like you were, I don't know, many years ago. So I feel it's exactly I'm in the same place. But just a little, just introduce ourselves. I mean, and Annie and I, we own some cultural transformation company. And so we are, we have a deep belief that everybody can grow. So, and our work is really deep rooted, and then, you know, we're trying to get everyone to grow in organization. So we are, you know, I'm going to have Andy introduce a little bit more, but just delighted to be here and really share our idea and listen to other people's idea, and just has a lot of learning today. And So part about myself, I'm actually, Jim, you'll be proud of me. I'm actually a Taiwanese, okay? So I grew up in Taiwan, and a little bit, and Andy and I are married. So we have an 18-year-old daughter, actually went back in Taiwan in June. So she's having a great time, and we hear the news from her all the time. So, so just happy, part of my, where I'm originally from is doing well in this kind of crazy world. And, I think, Dieuwke, I think that's probably what you wanted me to share, or maybe you ask me a question what direction you want me to go. Yeah.
Maybe you said you share a passion about growth. Can you tell a little about what you do, what your company is about?
Okay. Yeah, sure. We are, where we are actually, Dieuwke, I'd rather have Andy, answer that question, because we have our each responsibility. I think he can say a little bit better than I do. So I'd rather pass that question to him. Okay.
Then I'll ask you another question. You said that you have a passion for growth, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And you shared it with Andy.
Yes, I think we actually, that's where we met. We actually met in a personal growth kind of, year-long personal growth journey together. So, and we make many decisions how we actually, I don't know about him, but when I choose who's going to be my lifetime partner, I would be joking. I say, if there's anything we hit an obstacle, if we have problem, like in our relationship, at least, we will say, I think I'm a part of the problem, versus just saying, I think that's all the other person's problem. So, and that's what I base on that in getting to this relationship. So.
Okay. Yeah. And so you met in a kind of personal growth group, and I gathered that your business is also about growth, huh?
Yes. Mm-hmm. We're doing more culture transformation for organizations. So yeah. And
so could you say, can you tell me how it feels that you have this shared passion for growth? That is where you met. That is how you started your marriage, and you started a business on the same value, on the same passion.
Yeah, I think, in a certain way, I think that's what keep us kind of going and keep, challenging each other. I thoroughly cannot imagine being in a relationship. My partner, my husband would just say, "Oh, Claire, that was so fun. That sounds really good. So go keep growing yourself." But he's not a part of it. Okay. So yeah.
So he is really a part of what you are doing, and you're challenging each other and help each other grow.
Yeah, constantly.
Right?
I mean, you can say 5 minutes, okay?
So is there anything else which working with Andy gives you?
I think when you work with a partner, you have to have a sense of trust and hope. So you work with a partner, you just say, "Oh, you know what? A person's just going to be the way this. I'm going to work around that. I'm going to I'm kind of compensate what he's not good at." Okay. Mm-hmm. And that's never my philosophy. I say, you got to be good at it. You say, "I'm not good at organizing." No, you got to get good at it. Okay. So I think that really keep up our, at least, again, Andy can speak for himself. Okay. But the relationship, I have a sense of hope he is going to be able to change and shift, even though he say, "I'm just not good at this." I say, "Honey, no excuses, grow." Okay. So yeah.
Okay. Andy, how about this shared passion for growth?
Yeah. No, it's the sort of North Star of our relationship and our work, in that I think for both of us. And so our work is around scaling human development, scaling growth, particularly in organizations. And as Claire's pointing to, it It's about trying to create organizations that where individual development becomes a team sport. And so where the community is involved. And so we're helping each other develop and grow. And if Claire and I weren't doing that in our marriage, and if our little business wasn't grounded in that orientation, there's no way we could be bringing it into other organizations with any credibility and with any, kind of lasting sort of commitment. Because I think part of what's enabled us, particularly in the last year or so, part of what's enabled us for the business to grow is that people have a sense of that, and that this is a moment right now, I think we're in, as you and Jim have referred to this moment that we're in, where there's a need for more human connection rather than less, and where people have this sense that, wow, with all the disruption that's happening, I need to develop some new capabilities. I need to grow myself, but I don't want to do it alone. I want to be part of a community of people that are intentional about this. And we've been really fortunate in our work. It's led us to connect up with Robert Keegan and Lisa Leahy up at Harvard, who in the field of constructive developmental psychology, are really rock stars in the world. And so they're co-founders actually of our business. And to be able to bring in some of the insights from that field into organizations and, make development more of a team sport is enormously satisfying for us, on a very personal level, because we know what that means,
Because you're a developmental team yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So what does that bring to you and to your success, this working together? How does it work?
Well, I can tell you that this sort of our core offering that we bring to organizations is a program or a process that we call a developmental sprint. And so it's a bounded 1 month kind of experience that for that period of time makes development a team sport for people. And there's lots of things we can talk about how it does, but for our purposes here, it's just to say we designed it out of the particular capabilities that each of us have, and so it reflects some good parts in it that have kind of ability to sort of do macro kind of stuff and facilitate large groups and so forth. I bring some of that, and the more micro elements to it that I never would have seen. This would not have come about if it wasn't a partnership between Claire and I. And Claire brings elements to this that we were able to put together into the offering that we bring. And so every aspect of our services are co-designed. And so, so it brings, it just wouldn't exist outside of our marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how much do you feel that this is really created by you being married or being a couple, or could have been created in another form of cooperation with a man?
Well, I've had a business in the past where it was a partnership with another man or a couple of other men, and we didn't create this. So heretofore, prior to our engagement, Dieuwke, and our conversations, I would have said that, well, it was primarily because we didn't have the right complementary sort of skill sets and so forth. Like Claire and I have this complementary set of skill sets, but your work and your teaching that you shared here even has woken me up further to realize, hey, there might be something more going on there.
Yeah.
Because there really was a sense of competition that between myself and the other men that I was in partnership at the time. So I think there's really something to what you're sharing, Dieuwke.
Yeah, I'm very happy you say so, because I really feel that this is such a basic thing, but there is no awareness on it yet, and it is growing. Okay, sometimes people are working. I had one couple who were working together. They did great things together. He was head of the fire business, and she was head of the healthcare business, and they were convening during a crisis. There was a fire on our airport, and it was only, and they were very good together, and it was, she was able, normally when there is a crisis center, and there all the heads of the tops are together there dealing with the crisis. But he was a fireman and had to be at the fire. And she dared to go there because she knew him and trusted him and could work with him. So she left her tower and went straight to the fire, and saw that one of the things the firemen do when there is a fire, they make a kind of canal around the fire with water so it can't spread. And people had to cross that canal to get into safety. And she saw they were cold and wet. And so she asked for blankets. And then she saw something else, that there were still people in the fire. And she said they have to get out. And that wasn't possible because they were prisoners. And you cannot allow prisoners to walk. That has a certain ritual and certain necessities and procedures before they can walk. And she said, shit, no way, they have to get out. And she could get to him and say, tell them to get those prisoners out. And she did choose for life and not for procedures. And because she was there, they were saved. But she had never dared to go there if she wasn't together with him. But that is the good side of the story. Second is, we come from a very individual culture. So we all do our individual careers. So she takes another job. She falls apart. He falls apart. They never were aware of the fact how much their cooperation was at the bottom of their productivity, their success, their well-being. And I asked them, did you never consider applying together for a job? No, never. So we really need awareness around this creativity, that between men and women is creativity, not only on the physical level. We not only produce babies, we produce a lot in creativity together. Okay, let's go to the other couple. Do we have Valerie now? Is she in? Yes, she's in. Hi, Valerie. We didn't say hello yet. Valerie and Reinier are from Volt, and Volt in itself is very nice to get to introduce to, because they are the first European political party. And when I discovered Volt, I was really so enthusiastic, because everybody who is, because the reason is that, first of all, they have not an ideology, they are not against things, but they work from values. And who have the values, you know, well, but they're pragmatic, they're European, and everybody who's a little bit into spiral dynamics will make the same discovery as I did, that this is the first yellow political party. So I was very happy. And you can imagine my joy when I discovered that for them, shared leadership is normal. And they have it everywhere in their party. And so I'm very happy to introduce this real positive new initiative of a European party, and also with this structure, which is innovative and creative, of having what they call co-leads. So welcome Reinier and Valerie in here. And my first question is for you, Valerie. You were the one who advocated co-leads. So could you elaborate a little about why you did and what were your reasons?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you, Dieuwke, and also Jim, for today and sharing such inspiring stories. But also, I really like the 1 minute meditation, which I would really hope that some of our political and leaders and world leaders would sit down and do that more often, perhaps, and listen to their hearts. So I think actually also a really important point, I think we need to bring the heart into politics. And I'm not sure Volt is achieving it yet, but we certainly are aiming for doing so. And so I think also for Volt, because you said, we're aiming to kind of promote our values that we stand for, but also we're quite pragmatic. And I think with the co-leadership, it was actually quite a pragmatic approach to begin with. When we started, we realized that it was two things. So first of all, we were a very small team. We started in 2016 after Britain voted to leave the EU and Trump was elected, actually. And so we were a really small team that set out to build the first pan-European party and movement. And we simply had to build capacity. So we created this co-lead system on the one hand because we couldn't afford a lead who were all volunteers if that person wasn't available for a team not to function. So we just put another lead into place. And then the second point was that if you look into, I'm from Germany, so if you look into German politics, but also European politics, then women are very much underrepresented everywhere. So we're talking generally about a 30% women ratio in political parliaments and so on. And we wanted to change that. And obviously we had the same problems that a lot of other parties, that women actually didn't join us as much as men did. So we said, okay, well, the women we have need to be in lead positions just as much as men have to be, or men are. So women always have someone to go to in a lead position and have a role model. And I think it really helps. And if I look at myself, then having role models and having women that are older than me and are in certain positions and that I could look up to and understand what kind of paths they take and how they do things, then that really helps me. And so I think applied to politics, it's super important.
Okay, so an important reason for you to claim for co-leads, apart from the pragmatic part, is that it is easier for women to join when there are women in positions, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely observe that whenever we have a woman in a co-lead position, then other women are much likelier to join the team.
Yeah, okay. Now, and what is your experience with the men? How does working with Reinier help you?
I love it. I think it's amazing. I think in general, also if we look into politics, and there is this difference between campaigning and office holding. So there is the campaign part to run for an office. I think a good example is Trump, someone who's really good in campaigning, not very good in being a team player and a team lead. And I think that is what comes, maybe we should overthink our democratic processes here, but I think what a team lead position, a co-lead position creates, so a shared leadership position, is you have actually people run, I think, who are comfortable with then playing in a team, because they know they will not be the final decision makers. They have to spare it with another person. And I think here, Reinier and I are in I think, from my side, I can say great position that so far it's been only positive, our shared leadership experience.
1 second. What I find interesting in what you say is that shared leadership kind of prevents the dictatorship. Is that true?
I guess to a certain extent, right? Because you cannot just write off something yourself. You always have to talk to another person. And I think we discussed that when we spoke before, but I think to an extent, obviously, it might sometimes lengthen decision-making processes. But I think if you are actually a team, then in the end, the decisions you make are more sustainable, they're better thought through because you already have at least included two perspectives. And if we look at team leads, then usually each one is perhaps also, asking other people. So you have lots of different perspectives in a decision. And I think in the end, it's maybe always the more efficient, but certainly the more effective style of leadership. And I think effectiveness is definitely what we should aim for.
Yeah, right. Reinier, where are you? I missed.
Yes, here I am.
There you are. Okay. Hi. Last time we met, we were in the museum hiding for the rain.
Yes.
So we talked then already a little bit, but can you say how would you describe your cooperation or with Valerie?
I would describe it as very fruitful so far. We connect on a human level, and we have a lot of values that we think the same about, and we hold the same value to those values. But we, at the same time, differ a lot in what our main interests are and what our main strengths are. And I think those two things are very complementary. And with that solid basis, it allows us to have better leadership of our movement.
Okay. So you're able to differentiate, but it is kind of coherent because you have these shared values.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Hopefully.
And I remember that you said in our former conversation, yeah, it takes longer.
Yes, it takes longer, especially
but it has more quality. Can you say something about that?
Yeah, well, the thing is, what makes it extra hard for us is Valerie's based in Berlin, I'm based in Amsterdam, and we're an organization with mainly volunteers. So 99% of all the people that are active for Volt are volunteers. And to some extent, the duo leadership model, the co-leadership model, helps with having more people that are accessible to reach out to certain questions. But at the same time, it forces the co-leaders to be in touch a lot together as well. And I think we have found a way where we really made clear what our mutual expectations are, and found a way of communicating that's quite still quite efficient. But throughout our movement, I see that it can really be slowing down decision-making processes. And sometimes it's very good, because if you slow down and are forced to share your thoughts even more, then we become more effective, because efficiency is not always what we should strive for. Effectiveness is what we should strive for. However, there are sometimes moments where a bit more efficiency would help us too.
Okay. When I summarize what Valerie and you say is, first of all, that it is a safe construction for women to join. But secondly, that the being able to be complementary to each other, to help each other, that you can trust the other to do the things you don't feel so good in yourself, and that the coherence comes from the sharing of the same values. Do you have any idea how much the difference in gender helps here?
I find that hard to determine, because I really like the phrase between balance and balance, intuition and logic, and I don't think that fully applies to me and Valerie. But I would phrase it a little bit different. You have these. I don't like to use these terms a lot, because I think it upholds the structure or belief we have created as a social construct. But I'm going to say it anyway. Masculine, so archetypical masculine leadership qualities, and archetypical feminine leadership qualities. And I think within Valerie and me, they're kind of swapped, actually. So sometimes it was described as Valerie is the head of of our team, and I am the heart of our team. And I think that was a funny way to put it. So does that refer to a certain gender? For me, not necessarily. I think it's more about what kind of personality does someone have.
Yeah, my question is this experience that you're perceived as Valerie as the head and you are the heart of the organization. How do you feel that the difference in gender between you makes that possible?
It's very hard for me to determine, to be honest, because you could argue that, but I'm not entirely sure. I think perhaps it makes it a bit easier, but yeah, I to be honest, I'm not sure. I'm curious, Valerie, what do you think?
It could be. I wouldn't know how to nail it down right now, but it is not the first time that I am in a co-leadership position. So I also, or basically, I was leading the German team before, and it wasn't a co-leadership by then because we hadn't implemented yet at the board level. But basically, the person that I was basically running it together with the vice president, and saw him as equal. And so I think I do always perform better with, I would just say, male counterpart, but maybe this is something that is personal. I don't know.
We are hardly used to see this, to feel the kind of possibility there is. I would like to show you a little something which has to do with the different sources of power men and women have. It's something which has been investigated very much by Claire Sammet, who is doing a lot for women. Can I have I must do this myself, the power screen. Oh, no, wait. Oh, yeah. No. Okay, no, I don't get into it somehow. No, this is not. Okay, sorry. Now I'll just talk about it.
Second, I'll share it for you. 1 second.
What? Ah, very good. Thanks. Different sources of power of men and women, something which has been very much investigated by Claire Sammet, who is doing a lot on feminine power. And when you see what kind of power women return to, can I get the next slide? Yes. Women find it always very important to have a good relationship with themselves. And they like to co-create and cooperate with others. They rely and have a lot of empathy for others, and they feel a connection with the creative impulse in the universe. So your passion for growth, Claire, is there. The creative impulse for growth and evolution. When you look at sources of power for men, there's a lot of men get a lot of strength and power to do things and to use their skills. Loyalty is for them very important. Loyalty, to give loyalty and to receive loyalty from their friends or peers or whoever. A sense of purpose gets them going. And on the spiritual level, the grail. Like our gym is keep holding the grail out for us every evening for a sustainable society. Now, if you see these two sources, can you see what happens when we have a balance between them? I don't know how to get up again. I'm doing this very simple.
There are only 3 slides in this presentation. Are there more?
No, this is all. There are only 2. But if you see these differences between when you see when there is not a balance and you have only this power to do and to have results, then you get in this frenzy of activities which are very harmful. If there is too much loyalty, you're in the old boys network. If there is too much of a purpose, that is people who get in a tunnel vision. The other way around, if you look at women, if there is too much interest in their own development, you get in these endless self-help groups of self-help books. When there is too much of co-creation and cooperation with others from the same gender, then you see, before what I just saw the statistics here in Holland, that only 30% of the startups are women and only 5% are having any success. Empathy is good, but there must also be some loyalty to your own group or family. Connection with the creative impulse together with the grail makes things going. So when you look at this, you can see how it is the balance what we really need and the one-sidedness which weakens us. So I very much like to say it again, let us close the circle. For all the beautiful projects which have been passing also here on Humanity Rising, for all the important things which we need to do in our times, let's close the circle. For support, we have dark times ahead, for support and also for effectiveness and creativity. It is like what Alan Watts said, you cannot have the tea without a cup. We need a structure which works too, and shared leadership is the closing of the circle again. So I would like to, my last words are to invite everybody to engage in that kind of struggle, power, involvement with the other gender, because it is the most old, organic, ancient, sacred activity we can engage in. And it brings what we need. And last but not least, there is the beginning of shared leadership in the United States with Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, so vote for them. And now I hand it over back to Jim.
Thank you, Dieuwke. I just want to recognize Valerie. You have had your hand up. Is there anything you want to add to what Dieuwke just said?
You're muted. Yeah.
I think it was very interesting because when she pulled up the slides, my straight away my thoughts were, I can only see myself in two of the ones for female power or sources of power, and I recognize myself also in male sources of power. So it is interesting how perhaps you see yourself, and also it would be interesting how others perceive yourself and which of these sources apply.
Yeah, very, very good point. And within this context, I want to raise a question that Leslie Southwick Trask put in the chat, and is about how your work has embraced the significance of generational evolution. And she makes the point that her millennial children show up much differently in terms of the male-female roles, both professionally and personally, than the older generation. So would love to have any of your who would like to comment on the generational aspects of
That's an interesting question, because of course the cultural constructions about the genders differ per generation. What I find very interesting, that a good colleague of mine works at an educational institute which is already working in teams, and the so-called Team Academy. And they work in groups and they do their performances in groups. And for them, shared leadership is completely normal. So it is, I think, the new generation who are less coming from the times started by the 60s, from a very individual culture, are much more at ease with shared leadership.
Yeah. Good comment. Anybody else want to comment on that?
I'll just say I have just a sense of that is that we get a chance to work with leaders of all generations, and so I think you're exactly right. I think the younger generations are more open to it. It's more natural. They're more networked and connected already, and so I think it has the potential to be very much a rising trend. And even with Claire and I have two kids. We have two teenagers, 17-year-old boy and 18-year-old daughter. And both of them, I think, are sort of more comfortable than, say, certainly I was at that age in terms of embracing that idea. So I have hope around that. I don't know if Claire shares that, but that's my sense.
Well, this leads to another question I'd like to pose, and it I think it came to my mind, Valerie, when you made your comment that when you looked at the sources of power for men and women, you sounded like you were kind of equally spread between the two. And I wanted to probe that for your comments around the increasing fluidity in gender and sexuality. Dieuwke, we're from the 60s generation, and back in the the 60s, a woman was a woman and a man was a man, and that's, everybody knew what the difference was. And now you've got everything from gay to bi to trans to pan to people now increasingly, that at least in the flow going across my computer screen, are identifying themselves as he, she, they. And so I just wonder what you all think about gender parity in a world where the genders are kind of melting away in terms of any traditional notions of what male and female even are.
It's interesting that you raised this topic, if I can respond immediately, because I'm here with my girlfriend who's also listening in, and the first thing she said was like, aren't these just personality traits? Why are they equated to a single gender? And I think that is something that I hear in my generation a lot. I'm 31 years old. I must admit, we are in a sort of politically active, progressive scene where people are very much aware of these things, woke, so to speak. But besides that, that I might be a bit biased because of that, my social environment, not thinking in these gender constructs, I do think that it's actually a bigger wave we see across society, where people from 30 and younger say, well, actually, this is personality traits and not necessarily male or female character traits.
Yeah, I think we have here two discussions at once. One is how much it is possible to differentiate between male and female traits. And it's a bit like cultural identities. It is always difficult to pinpoint them, though Claire Zemmet has done a lot of research on this. She's PhD even in it. But it's always difficult to pinpoint them. And on the other hand, you feel them when you cross the border. So it's difficult. The other thing is, I think when it is about transgender and I think that we come from a time starting in the 60s, Jim, when all kinds of groups which have been more oppressed or been minorities in more traditional times, like gay people, the women themselves, are picking up the right to be themselves as they want to be. And that's the whole, the transgenders are kind of the last wave in that movement. And so, but that shared leadership, however, the characteristics are divided of them, but shared leadership as a difference in gender is still a very valid concept. However you define or talk or whatever about feminine or masculine.
Any other comments on that?
Yeah, if it's okay for me to jump in. I mean, I'm obviously not in, I haven't studied this subject, but to me, it would be logical that it might be also hard to an extent that, like, how can, you know, to an extent, how were women pushed evolutionary into a certain position and therefore developed certain traits, and men the other way around, or were thought of having certain traits. You almost can't separate that from men or women really having these traits, right? Because they developed it because they were pushing it. Just like looking at my grandmother's and mother's generation, or specifically at my grandmother and mother, I think compared to them or with them, I can be much more confident in living my personality. I would say that I actually was born in a generation and now can live in a generation where I'm encouraged to live the person that I am, and therefore perhaps even encounter much less frustrations than my grandmother and mother, who were pushed into a certain function of being housewives and so on.
But we're always pushed by our culture. I'm a woman, and what it is like to be a woman is very much influenced by the fact where I was born and in what year. And if I now say I was able to make a career and I'm free, it's because I was pushed by the culture that it was possible. We are always pushed by the culture.
Yes, and I'm not saying I am not influenced, but I feel like I do have more choice, because if we just look at the legal situation, and then now women are mainly equal in their rights, at least in Germany, when that in the 60s was not the case at all yet. So I do think they're like the barriers actually that we are operating in have opened, even if we're perhaps not quite there yet.
But that's a product of the culture you live in, that you have those choices. So you are a cultural product too. You always are.
Well, there's no doubt that culture does play a profound role in shaping all of our lives. We don't have very much time, but let me just ask a final question, because all of this is about an exercise of power, male, female leadership. And as we know from Lord of the Rings and any treatise over the century about the nature of power, is that it's inherently corrosive. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So I would love to ask the two couples, and then maybe Dieuwke, you can make a final comment, then we'll close out. I'd like to ask the two couples how you deal with the shadow content of power in your relationships.
Could you say a little bit more what you mean, Jim, as you talk about the shadow?
Well, one exercises power, as we all know. There's an inherent corrosiveness to power, and it's like the ring in Lord of the Rings, so any leadership dynamic, any partnership dynamic, any relational dynamic, always any human dynamic has a shadow side. And it's easy to think, if we just bring men and women together, they're sort of going to live happily ever after, but the struggles will endure, and the shadow content will endure in different forms. So we all easily can see the shadow content of patriarchy. What's the shadow content of partnership leadership? Now, maybe that's too big a question at the end, but I think it's something that's worth taking on. In fact, I was having some conversations with the Chileans about this, that we think, oh boy, you put men and women together to form the new constitution in Chile. what are going to be the new power struggles? What are going to be the new shadow content that will appear in Chile? Because all the women aren't the same, all the men aren't the same. You put them together in different combinations now.
I think
So
we got a
just
few
question
answers. I think we got a few answers. Valerie said it prevents when you have shared leadership, you have no dictator. You have not one person in the top. And the other answer we got was that when there is a gender difference, there is less competition. Power is less a struggle.
I will also add, I think, you can say it's the shadow part of this, number one, you do have, the common goal kind of pull you out of that conflict of the shadow sets more often. And then the other thing is you're always going to have the shadow side, but you just have to say, well, we learned something, we have the shadow side. So how do we handle next time when this arises? Can we actually be better at it next time when we handle this? Is there anything we can grow? Because it's feel clunky. One grabs more power, the other one. So this is discussion is an opportunity. Actually, you can grow out of that. You're imbalance. So.
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt that the shared leadership is a more effective antidote against shadow than just a single authoritarian leader without boundaries. That's, I think, pretty true. So any other quick comments?
Yeah, I agree with Claire, and I think I don't think that shared leadership means that there is no competition, but it really depends. I think it could even be the very opposite. And I think in partnership or shared leadership, you can have a lot of competition, but it doesn't need to be negative. So it really depends on the person you are and the other person, what you make of it. And I think it requires a lot of work on yourself, how you see certain things. So I think there is some feelings, if you don't work on them in yourself, then they can be poison to a relationship, which then obviously affects your shared leadership position and can trickle down into an organization that you lead. Something like I'm not sure if I translate correct, but like resentfulness, like if you're not able to forgive, or you think that, or you cannot step over perhaps of your own ego sometimes. And but I think this is actually, it can really go both ways, and perhaps it touches on your question, like if you manage it and if you really work on yourself. So you do need the female source to power on both sides. Actually, I think if you do work on yourself, then it can be so strong that I think individual leadership will not be able to compete with shared leadership. But if you're not, then it could, I think, also be a real failure.
Yeah. Good point. Dieuwke, give us just a quick final word.
I already did. No, of course, there are issues and shadow issues too in shared leadership, like there is in a marriage. And I think Valerie is absolutely right that you need to work on that. We come from a time where that aspect has been very much researched, personal development. So we can all do our homework. Also, I give classes or help shared leaderships to find out where they can be complementary and what the issues are. We all have a shadow and they all play a role. So, like Claire said, you push each other to grow. And that is what can happen in shared leadership. And I think, again, about that yin-yang, it is not stable. They are moving with each other. Because they're different, they make movement. Movement change comes from it. So let's close the circle. Let's close the circle.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think that's a beautiful final word, that partnership creates change, because diversity is inherently unstable. There's always movement between the yin and the yang and the opposites. And that's what makes the world go round. And it's a wonderful thing to explore this, everyone, right at the moment when history in Chile, of all places, has taken that first step.
But so does the presidency in the States.
Well, yeah, let us hope that that happens, but it's that in my mind is a little different for a president and a vice president. I think there's been lots of those examples in countries, but to have a country mandate in its constitution,
yeah,
that men and women are going to be equal,
yeah,
in governance, is sort of that next step.
Never had a female vice president candidate yet in the States, so it is a first step.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. And let's hope that we have the opportunity to make it, given what's going on over there. But thank you, everyone. And please know that if you look at the chat, there's the link to the after session, which all you presenters are welcome to. We have a very, very loyal and active chat group, and every day there's an after session where they meet informally. So everybody's welcome to join. And then again, next week, starting on Monday, 5:00 p.m. Central European Time, we're going to be looking at what's happening with the US election. We have an incredible array of people that are going to be joining that are wise observers of human affairs and American history and the culture of democracy and the culture of chaos and the culture of authoritarianism. As the world now traverses a major rite of passage. The consequences of this election cannot be overstated, not only for the future of the United States, but the future of the world at all kinds of different levels. So thank you, everyone. Dieuwke, that was great. Claire, Andy, Valerie, Reinier, wonderful to have this exemplification of what shared leadership means at that moment when the world took its first step into that terrain. Wonderful, wonderful synchronicity. Thank you all so much. Bye, everyone. See you again on Monday.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, Dieuwke.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Valerie and Reinier.
Bye-bye.
And Valerie, Andy, Claire, Jim, and Reinier.